What's happening, guys? The last time you guys saw this Corvette, it was a complete dog. It wouldn't even do a burnout. But now we're gonna make some changes to that. We got a new carburetor. We're gonna do a little tune-up on it, and we're gonna get this thing running right because I want to be able to drive it this summer and have a good time. So stick around. We're gonna get into it. Thanks. So I had moved the Corvette earlier in the spring and it was running very poorly, and I took the battery out of it. So first thing I had to do was stick a battery back in it. And I get that battery all snugged in there. And what is that battery? Dead, of course, naturally. So the only thing I can do is try to wedge a Jeep in there. It's a real small space. I was trying to give it a jump and just see if I could give it a little bit of life. Unfortunately, once the battery was in there, the starter did not want to engage. And I knew that was an issue with this thing in the past. The old starter in there had been heat soaked so many times. The way these downpipes came off the thing, they were just way too close to the starter. So it would always have issues of getting hot and not starting and being unreliable in general. So that's one of the first things I got to do on my list. So with the help of my dad's trusty El Camino, we were able to pull this thing out of the gully there and eventually just got it shoved in the shop here. So now I've got all my parts and pieces laid out. I've got a carburetor, a new starter, cap and rotor, plugs and wires. I don't necessarily know if I'll do plugs and wires. These are pretty new, so I'm gonna start with the starter first and move on from there. I finally get this old boat anchor out, and it is amazing to see the size difference between the mini starter and this old one here. The new mini starter is hardly larger than just the solenoid on this. So this is 20, 25 pounds, maybe more. And it's so much extra space in there between the actual exhaust and the mini starter. So we're gonna have much better time with heat issues, and it's gonna crank a lot harder than this old one would have. After that old starter was out, I just had to take my time and put this new mini starter in. It went in a whole lot easier than the old one came out. Much lighter, much smaller, and much better clearance. And from there, I wanted to get started on the most exciting part to me, which is obviously the carburetor. It's shiny, it looks good, it makes fuel making happen. It's just it's where I wanted to start, but we'll see what happens when I get into it. So what had happened when I pulled that carburetor off is that I immediately noticed that it was a spread bore configuration. Now, if you don't know what that is, that means 2 big butterflies in the back, 2 small butterflies in the front. And I didn't have one of those. I had bought that carburetor for this car, actually. This is a 78 Corvette with a square bore style intake. And square bore just means 2 equal sized butterflies, top and bottom. And so I didn't know how I was going to overcome that at the moment. So I moved on to my distributor. I was going to put my cap and rotor in and get that all set. When I got that rotor off, I realized just how much moisture had gotten inside of it and how junky it really was. So after that, it was back onto the carburetor, and I had dug around in my carburetor parts bin, parts and pieces I've collected over the years, and I actually found a spread bore to square bore adapter in there, and the day was saved. Other than the fact I didn't have any socket head cap screws that were the right length. I had some, but they weren't long enough. So it was back to the drawing board. I had to figure out something that I could screw down into this thing that weren't hex bolts, because they just won't fit into that hexagonal shape. But I had the right length and size hex cap screws here, so I did a little rootering on it, and you'll see what I made out of that. And voila, just like that, I'm ready to open a machine shop. So I had it little something made up, and it worked, and I'm quite pleased with it. So now it's time to slap on that carburetor. So as close as I was to victory, it's always something. It's probably because I was wearing a Ford hat, but the EGR valve was in the way, and there's no getting around that. I tried putting a 2-inch spacer in there, but then it sat too high and the hood wouldn't close. So I had to take that EGR valve off, and to do that, I had to make a block off plate. So all I needed was a small piece of metal to be able to press up against the actual EGR manifold, so I knew the size. What I did was I just painted onto the EGR and then pressed the piece of metal into it, so I was able to get a nice imprint, so I knew what I was working with and what I had to cut and make out. So as you can see, I got a nice impression. I was able to chop out right around it perfectly, and then I just took a piece of cardboard and traced around it, so I was able to have a gasket underneath of it. Cereal boxes work well for this. Mwah! Chef kiss. Take that, EPA. No more EGR. I got that carburetor on there and it was looking really good, but as my eye cast towards the front of the motor, I was noticing a little more crowding, and I think it had to go. That one was for all the smog pumps that have wronged us. Junk. Much, much cleaner. This project would not be complete without a zip tie, of course. It's finally that time. We're ready to crank this sucker and see what it does. naturally the battery's dead. That's just the way it goes. So gotta wait till tomorrow, gotta charge the battery, and we'll be back at it right after that. So at this point, I'm happy about a few things. It starts up really well. That starter is gangbusters. It's so much better than the old one. It starts right up, but it's not really running great. It's still it's popping, it's chugging, it's not one to idle really well. When you rev it up, it's okay at the higher RPM, but it's just not wanting to run right. But it's good enough to go for a drive, and I'm curious as to see how it goes on the road. So no time like the present. So I get it out there driving, and at the higher RPM, it's really pulling nicely, but from a dead stop to nothing, it's still wanting to pop and bang. And I take it on maybe a 10 or 15 minute drive, and I see it's getting warm, which is out of the ordinary. And I come back and I put a test light on it, and I see what the heck's going on there. I could not believe what the test light was telling me. It was saying it was 15 degrees out of timing. I don't know how on earth it even started, let alone ran. I'm amazed that it did it, but holy cow, this thing is alive now. That 15 degrees, it put the snot in this thing. It is not a fast car still, but it is rowdy, it is fun, it is loud. I'm super impressed and pleased with it. There's only one real test that we need to compile to end this video, I think, and that is where it failed last time. Will it succeed? The burnout. Let's check it out. This thing has gone from 0 to hero. When you look at that before and after, it makes the whole thing seem way worth it. It wouldn't even kick the tires out before, now it's roasting them with relative ease. I could have laid some better patches there, but this is my street, and the man will come and yell at me if I'm too rowdy over here. So I put a couple of 11s down, and I feel like that's good enough for me. Again, super pleased with the car. If you saw it before in that comparison video, this is an entirely different car. It's great. It's fun to drive now. It's rowdy, and it's just awesome to drive. So thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for watching me work on it, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, guys.